what is your opinion of Brian Kelly? And since this went so well with the Dabo experiment and the Jimbo experiment and the Lincoln Riley experiment, why should I expect anything different with Brian Kelly? And I was right, predictably. So, first thing, before we even talk about your opinions on Brian Kelly, you know what's insane? That's been so far in front of our faces, I think some people forget. You know this dude's been coaching over 30 consecutive years at the head coaching level? You know how difficult that is to do? Just show up every day. Not even winning, just showing up every day. And then winning, being at a consistently high level. This dude's first year as a head coach was 1991. 91! He was at Grand Valley State from 91 to 2003. That is just 12 years spent there. And then he goes to Central Michigan for a couple of years. Then Cincy for a couple of years. He was at Notre Dame from 2010 to 2021, guys. He was there over a decade. And now he's at LSU. There's been no year off. 3+ decades as a head football coach in college football, and in most of those years, major college football. Wild. And here he is, still relevant. And some would say, I don't know, I guess this would be fair to say, whenever the book's written on Brian Kelly, it's very possible that the core chapters have yet to be written, which is absurd. It's just wild to say about a guy who's got 30+ years under his head coaching belt. Think about what he could do at LSU. And think about what the future could hold. Near future and long-term future. He's already closing in on 300 career wins. Like, I remember reading stories about when Bear Bryant got to 300 wins, and it was towards the tail end of his career. Kelly could coach another decade for all we know. So, I asked you what your opinions were of him. I thought our buddy Chris Marlar from Saturday Down South did a phenomenal job of blending cinema with college football to describe what the majority of you feel about Brian Kelly. Colin, do we have that? Check out what our buddy said here. He said, Brian Kelly is the Nick Cage of Southern accents, but he's the John Malkovich of coaching. Sorry, I've been watching Con Air all weekend. Con Air, as we all know, phenomenal film, robbed of many Academy Awards. This was a movie, for example, that saw a young Dave Chappelle killed on a prison aircraft, followed by having a note written on his shirt and then tossed out of an airplane to sail to the ground below so that the person on board with the bad Southern accent, Nicolas Cage, could alert authorities that the plane had been taken over. What more do you need to know? If you haven't seen that movie already, go see it yesterday, but wait until after the show. So anyway, he's right. Marlar's right, because there are a lot of you out there who are not LSU fans, let's just say. There are a lot of you out there who look at Brian Kelly and there's something you don't like about him, but it's on the exterior in most cases. And then you follow it up with but, and then following the but is he's a really good coach. So you got some Nick Cage bootleg Southern accent, but then you get down to the John Malkovich part and you realize he's a really good actor, or in this case, he's a really good football coach. Now there's this other group out there. As I was perusing through the replies today, there's this other group out there that is fixated on the fact that this man, Brian Kelly, has not won a national championship, which I cannot argue with on a fact-based basis. He has not won one. But I did get into it a little bit with one of you today. If it was a little too rough, I apologize. I don't think it was, though. It wasn't. Scratch that. It wasn't. I don't apologize. Maybe I should apologize. You tell me. Here's what happened. So I start talking about Brian Kelly, and someone came back at me and said, yeah, but he hasn't won a national championship. And if he, here was the paraphrased quote. If he didn't win a championship at a more tradition-rich and history-filled program like Notre Dame, he'll never win one at LSU. I replied the only logical way one could reply to that, and I said, history and tradition cannot run a 4-4. The players he gets at LSU can. And the reply was, wait, are you telling me he didn't have good enough athletes at Notre Dame? And I said, I'm absolutely telling you he did not have good enough athletes there to beat Alabama or Clemson. The reply is one of the usual lame replies you get on social media platforms when someone's beaten. They say, yikes. Yikes can loosely be translated to, look at this white flag I'm waving, you win. No, he didn't have good enough players there. No, he was never going to get good enough players there. Now, if you're a Notre Dame fan, don't take that to mean Marcus Freeman can't do it. I'm telling you, Brian Kelly, who he is, at the place he was, and the way the place was when he was there, was never going to lead to a top 3 roster in college football. And seeing as how the Bamas and Clemsons of the world at the time were dominating the sport, that's what it was going to take to overtake one of them. So it doesn't matter to a lot of people. A lot of people just get fixated on the result. Like if you're trying to build an igloo in Juneau, Alaska, and I'm trying to build one in Tampa, it's a little bit tougher for me. But there are some people out there who look around and just say, they built one in Juneau, no problem. You only got like the first 2 layers of blocks there in Tampa before it melted. And I'm like, fool, I'm in Tampa. Doesn't matter. You didn't build it. And they did up there. I think some people look at that and understand there are some external factors that went in play there. I think there are also, likewise, some people that in college football understand there's some things in play at Notre Dame that aren't in play at LSU. I think, for instance, it's a testament to Brian Kelly that he had Notre Dame at the level he had him at for so long. I think it's a miracle that he was in the playoffs multiple times and played for a championship before the playoff arrived. I think that's a huge deal. Some people don't. We'll agree to disagree there, I guess. And it's not that people say he sucks because he hasn't won a national title, but they do look at him and say, no, I can't talk about him in quite the rarefied air some of you do. Well, I don't talk about him as being on par with Saban. I haven't talked about him. It's kind of apples to oranges with Smart because he's coached at the head coaching level longer than Smart's been a coach, period. But I have not put him in that category. Same conversation we had with Lincoln Riley the other night. I don't put him up there. So anytime the overrated sticker comes in, you know our question. Our question in response is, well, what is the person rated? What's Brian Kelly rated? He is in the top 10 and very well should be, and much higher than just the number 10 spot. But there's this third group, the group that I want to focus on, because the squeakiest wheel gets the grease, even on this show. There is a third group out there. There's a small but vocal group of people who are just plain mad Brian Kelly made them look dumb last year. These were the kind of people who really heavily leaned into the whole accent thing and the whole dancing and recruiting videos thing, and they swore that he was a bad fit, and he wasn't. He was always a good fit. Candidly, I would tell you he's a better fit at LSU than he was at Notre Dame. Just a shock to a lot of people, but those are the people who haven't been around Brian Kelly. I think they're learning this more and more day by day down in Baton Rouge. But the folks who called him out and who said it's going to be a disaster, there were many of them. This was not a fringe minority opinion. It was very popular opinion in the SEC that he's a terrible fit, culture will clash, and he won't fit in. He has seamlessly blended in. He has brought a new energy, both in portaling and recruiting there. He's also very professional in the way he structures an organization, the likes of which they were not seeing before he got there. And folks are looking around saying, when does reality hit? This reality that everyone outside of Baton Rouge told us was going to hit. Reality is hitting them. It's not going to hit you. You got the right guy. It's hitting them that you got the right guy. And some folks are mad about that because they don't like egg on their face. It's not just fans. There are folks in the media sphere of college football who also called for a quick exit for Brian Kelly. Going to be 1 or 2 years. You'll get tired of him. He'll get tired of you. And whatever happens, it'll blow up. No, it won't. No, it's not. All he did was win the West in year 1. And those people are a little more vindictive when they describe how they feel about Brian Kelly. These are the people that mix in the personal shots. I'm not wasting time on it on the show, obviously. But those are the main 3 groups of people that I saw today. Here's the difference. Sometimes when there's a younger coach, a guy who truly hasn't proven himself. Brent Venables is a really good example, actually. Venables, when I say young, I mean young as a head coach. Brent Venables at Oklahoma. Dan Lanning is actually a young guy who's also a young head coach at Oregon. These are guys who quite literally have not proven themselves as head coaches because they're brand new head coaches. If you want to doubt them, okay, we could have that argument. We could have that conversation, I guess is what it would be. With Kelly, you're not going to waste my time arguing with me about whether that guy's a high-level head coach. You will not. Now, if you want to get in the weeds a little bit, and you want to talk about specific strengths and weaknesses at LSU right now, you got some areas that they're very much above average in. I think if you are to point out areas, and this is mainly from the coaching perspective, you want to point out areas where over time they're going to have to get better, it's on the defensive side of the ball. I'm not talking about a specific player. I'm talking about more position groupings, and I'm more talking about guys who are leading those rooms. And these are not areas where they would grade out at an F or anything like that. But if you look at them compared to other staffs in the SEC, defense, they're going to have to get better in certain places. But they will, because they've got the money to do it. It is one of the greatest places to coach in America, and they'll get that figured out in the very short term. But as for Brian Kelly, the coach, it's another in a seemingly endless chamber that the SEC gets to fire at you of high-level head coaches. Very high-level head coaches. I mean, Lane Kiffin is just at Ole Miss. Hardly anyone even talks about him. Because you've got Nick Saban there, you've had him there for a long time. You're about to add OU and Texas down here as well. You could be a really good coach and just get lost in the shuffle down there. And for Brian Kelly to have walked in the SEC and immediately grab this much of the oxygen in the room was not easy to do and is not easy to do. And I think if we were to have him on the show, he would tell you humbly, maybe humbly, we're just getting started. I don't disagree with him.